What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I'm going to be showing you how to put together an awesome $1,500 gaming PC build for 2023 and beyond. I'll be covering off performance in this video, all the parts I chose and why, and explain why this build isn't likely to go out of date anytime soon, despite rumours of GPU releases later in the year. Without any further ado though, let's dive into it. I'm going to split this video into three main sections. First, the parts and why I picked the ones I did. Second, the build and how to put this thing together. And three, the performance, the bit you're all going to be excited to see. But first, we need to get this thing assembled so we can actually play some games and get those all-important frame rate numbers for you later on. I think the most important parts in any build to start off with really revolve around the motherboard. All the components that we'll be installing to build up the motherboard assembly. These comprise of the RAM, SSD, CPU, and motherboard itself. The CPU that I've selected for this build is Intel's Core i5-13400F. It's basically a slightly slower version and a non-overclockable variant of the 13600K without graphics. Now for a build like this, that's perfect. Overclocking on the Intel platform is so expensive in terms of the higher end motherboards needed, it's just not worth it. You still get Intel's latest P&E cores, great out-of-the-box clock speeds, and performance that frankly leaves AMD's alternatives in the dust a bit, at least for now. What it means though is we'll also need an Intel motherboard. You've basically got two choices, Z790 or B760. B760 boards are always going to be cheaper as they only support RAM overclocking and not CPU overclocking, which is fine, and offer slightly less features. You still get PCI Generation 5, you still get a great rear I/O. I mean, look at all the ports on this ASUS STRIX board and various different colour and style options like this white STRIX B760A Gaming. This board also supports Wi-Fi and DDR4 memory, helping you get connected and keep RAM prices that bit lower. In terms of the RAM, I've gone ahead and picked up a 32GB kit of Corsair's Vengeance RGB PRO, pretty much as cheap and cheerful as RGB RAM gets while still looking nice and providing a white colorway for the theme in this build. Storage is then going to be provided by a 1TB Samsung SSD 980. This drive gives read and write speeds in the region of about 3.5 gigabytes a second, meaning even the fastest of internet connections can still write and download games at maximum speeds. Gen 4 drives like the 980 and 990 Pro are great options, but they're expensive and frankly not really required in a build like this one. Graphics for this system is going to be provided by NVIDIA's RTX 3060Ti, a GPU that I hold steadfast in my belief is sort of one of a kind in the current market. AMD's 6750XT gets close, but is a less well-rounded and generally more expensive proposition, though latest pricing and availability can be found linked below for different regions, retailers, all that jazz. 3060 Ti gives far superior performance to a 3060, a card that you'd be better swapping out for a 6650XT, for example, and knocks on the door of what the 3070 can offer at a lower price. Now, we are expecting to see a 4060 60 Ti GPU lineup later this year, maybe Computex. We spoke about that in a recent video in the card section up here. But frankly, given NVIDIA's pricing strategy so far, I can't see how they're going to bring out a 3060 Ti replacement for anywhere near the current 3060 Ti price and MSRP. And when they do, the demand for that card is likely to be so high, and maybe the size so big by the looks of current existing GPUs on the market, that it might not be all that much of a compelling option. AMD's next card that's due, the 7800 800XT, might come fairly close to this, but for the price, I think it's still going to be more expensive. So with top rate 1440p and 1080p performance, this card fits the bill perfectly. It also doesn't require all that much power, which is where the power supply comes in. Corsair's modular white CX750M. You get white included cables as standard, and while they're not the fancy braided type, they still look quite nice and will work well for a system like this. It is only 80 plus bronze certified, but we don't need any more than that. No overclocking on the CPU in this build, so not a particularly power hungry system. The case is Lian Li's Lancool 215, a great budget-ish shout. So it's an ATX mid-tower that comes with a few little tricks up its sleeve. 200mm fans at the front of an RGB variety, and an additional 120mm unit in the back do the business well. Build quality is second to none, and the grey accents rather than black make a really nice change for a system like this one. Finally, the cooling will be provided by Cooler Master's PL240 Flux, the white edition. You get these beautiful white included fans and a design overall that's gonna fit perfectly. You can also find black alternatives to all the components today. The motherboard is the only thing you won't be able to find an identical black version of, but otherwise you shouldn't have too many problems if you want a different colour scheme in a system like this. But make sure you get subscribed to see our wide range of builds for different price points, budgets, aesthetics and performance levels. For now though, it's time to actually get this thing built, starting off with the motherboard, CPU, RAM and SSD. It was very dramatic, wasn't it? It was, yeah. SSD. All I need to do is open up the socket, match up the triangles, chuck, not literally, just chuck the CPU into place, pop the cover down, arm into place, lovely stuff. RAM is next up. We'll be using the 2nd and 4th slots in this build, and ASUS are fancy, so there's only clips on the top, no clips needed to be removed on the bottom. So RAM DIMM numero 1, RAM DIMM numero 2, a little something like so. For the next part, the SSD, you will need to throw away your rather large, full-size Phillips head screwdriver. Nearly. Close that one.
We do not recommend throwing.
No, we do not actually recommend physically throwing because then things like that happen. And you'll need to instead pick up a smaller, teeny tiny screwdriver. Oh dear, someone has stolen the teeny tiny screwdriver, wherever might that be. Who's the thief? Has anybody stolen the teeny tiny screwdriver by any chance? It's gone missing. It's been lost without a trace. Watch this be me who's actually stolen it. Oh, is that the one that's in my car? Yeah, it's in your car. Right, it's bad news. We've had to revert to a far inferior teeny tiny screwdriver. Maybe now is the moment we need to launch an official GeekaWhat design teeny tiny screw. This one's not even magnetic, look. Oh, it's terrible. On a more serious note though, I'll be installing the drive into this very top slot just here under this heatsink. You won't see it when it's all installed, but that'll keep the visuals for the build looking nice. I'm making a right mess of this today. Oh no, come on. There we go. 45-degree angle, it slides into place, and then the heatsink cover just goes back on. Nice little toolless installation mechanism on here as well to keep it in place without the need for any screws, which is good. Before moving this over into the case, I'm also going to add on some of the CPU cooler mounting hardware, basically the backplate, the posts, and then the screws which will sit on top, as that will make life a lot easier later once the board is into the case. The Intel brackets on the cooler will also make a bit of a difference now, as we can move on to the radiator fairly promptly after taking the motherboard and whacking it in the case. With this being an ATX board and that being an ATX case, it should all fit no problems, all the standoffs in the right locations. But if you've got a different size motherboard, you'll need to chop, change and just check you've got everything a-okay. Motherboard screws in, and with a built-in rear I/O shield, it literally couldn't be much easier. Looking good. Radiator is the next step. Fans are going to go on the underside of the rad first to pull air up and through the case, followed by the block onto the CPU. And thankfully the design on the block is actually rotatable, so the faint Cooler Master logo, which is more clear when the RGB's on, we can always make sure it's the right direction. The next thing is just to pop the graphics card in. Now, I could do this conventionally and just add it in a normal orientation, but I'm thinking something a bit different might look nice, and that is where this comes into play. This is the NZXT vertical GPU mounting kit in white. This build is like an amalgamation of all the major case brands. We've got Lian Li, Cooler Master, NZXT, and Corsair all in the same build, which I'm sure the brands won't like, but I think looks marvelous. So here we go. So we've got this white bracket. Basically, what you do is take out the existing PCIe lanes and add this in place instead. The included riser cable then plugs up to the very top slot, and that's all there is to it. There is one thing you need to keep in mind. When you take these PCIe lanes out, some cases have little bars in between. If yours does, you won't be able to use a device like this. But if you take them out and it's a completely open gap that you can put your arm through, for example, something like this will work well. Plus, you also get this little foot here, which is adjustable and basically allows you to make sure this is perfectly square to the bottom of the case. It uses the power supply shield as a bit of a reinforcement. Better as well than integrated options, as it has 3 slots and it's not too close to the glass panel, so airflow will still be a-okay. Pop it in, and doesn't that thing look awesome? And then to round things off, all that needs to go in then is the power supply, Corsair CX750M in this build. It's white, it matches perfectly, and with plenty of cables for all the parts in the system, we should be good. The only thing we do need to do is add an adapter in for the graphics card. At least it's only a 1-port adapter, unlike the modern 40 series, which is like 4 or 5 8-pin adapters. So this one's a lot cleaner, but still not the most visually appealing thing. And once that's in, it's time to boot this thing up, check out performance, but first, how it all looks in an epic montage, GeekaWhat style. I'll see you in a sec, but first, let's do this. Taking a look at performance of this system, and the numbers are just about where you'd expect them to be. Most of our testing was conducted at 1440p, as that's the resolution we feel the 3060 Ti excels the most. Warzone 2 was our first game, 1440p high with DLSS enabled and set to the quality preset. You could of course tune this to balance or performance for more frame rate, and we achieved here 92 FPS. Considering this is sort of a DLSS worst case scenario, this was a very, very strong result, while 90 and 99 percentiles were good too. Modern Warfare 2 Remastered was a similarly positive story, 1440p high with DLSS once again set to quality, delivered 90 FPS, just 2 frames per second shy of Warzone 2, which makes sense because underneath they're a very, very similarly made game. Fortnite was next, and this was the only title on the list tested at 1080p competitive settings. Here the system delivered a respectable 249 frames per second on average, with very solid 90 and 99 percentiles that gave consistent frame rates throughout. You could of course game at higher resolutions or higher settings at 1080p if a little bit more visual fidelity and a little bit less frame rate was what you're after. Moving through into Apex Legends, next up at 1440p, high settings this time around, and the frame rate of the day was 163 FPS on average. Once again, more than enough to saturate even the highest refresh rate monitors at 1440p to deliver competitive frame rates that should help you keep up with the rest of the field. Finally, we also tested a bit of Overwatch 2 just for a laugh. 1440p ultra settings, literally maxed out, apart from of course VSync. We don't want to limit our frame rate down to the measly 60 FPS mark. And here we achieved 202 FPS on average. Very, very impressive indeed for a system like this one. It just goes to show you still don't have to spend a fortune to get a well-performing PC in 2023. And don't be scared off by the fact the 3060 Ti has been knocking about for some time. Its 1440p performance for the price is still exceptional. I hope you enjoyed this video, thanks for tuning in, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.